All right, class. I know we just briefly went over and created our own little budget on the whiteboard, but now comes the boring part. I know you guys don't love vocabulary, but we've got to get through it. So I need you guys to take out your notes and write down the definitions of everything that comes up on the PowerPoint, please. All right, here we go. All right, budgets. We just made one, right? So budget, an estimate of expected income and expenses for a future period of time. All right, so we just made a pretty basic one, a little one. We talked about different expenses and incomes. Okay, income, first part of budgeting. Money received during a period of time from wages, interests, and other sources. Okay, so who wants to give me an example of some sort of income that you may receive? I know a lot of you might not have jobs, but I'm sure someone does. Molly?
I babysit every other Friday. Does that count?
Do you receive money for it?
Well, yeah.
Okay,
I
yeah.
babysit for free.
Okay, yes, that's a good example. Okay, so Molly babysits for some sort of income every other Friday, right?
Uh-huh.
Okay, and I'm just going to guess that you use that as expenses, right? Towards goods and services?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to get to that soon. All right, expenses. Money spent during a period of time to pay for goods and services. So Molly babysits, and she receives some sort of income from the family that she's babysitting for. And I'm assuming that she uses this as expenses. So who wants to give me an example of an expense? Joanne.
Makeup?
Yeah, makeup. That's a good example of an expense. You use your money towards buying makeup at the mall or wherever you buy makeup. I don't know where that is, but...
Walmart.
Walmart, okay. So you buy your makeup at Walmart. Now there's two different kinds of expenses. And I know we didn't cover them earlier when we made our own, but we only went over variable for you guys. But there's two different kinds. I know one of you knows in there. One of you knows out there what the two different kinds are, right? Joe?
Fixed and variable.
Yeah, fixed and variable. Okay. So, do you know the difference between fixed and variable expenses?
Fixed stay the same, don't they?
Fixed stay the same, yeah.
And
what
then
about
variable, they change.
Variable expenses change. That's exactly right. We're going to get to that right now. Okay, variable expenses, like Joe mentioned. An expense that changes from month to month. It doesn't stay the same. Okay, Billy, you want to give me an example of a variable expense?
Chips.
Chips, is that what you said?
Yeah.
Chips, yeah, that could be a variable expense. Okay, so...
Sometimes I like to eat 3 a day.
Sometimes you like to eat 3 a day?
Like the bags from the vending machine.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, that's, yeah, like Bill says, that's a good example of a variable expense. He probably doesn't spend the same amount of chips, or the same amount of money on chips every month. I'm assuming that's right. You probably spend, you might spend more in December than you might in January, right?
Not more in December, it's wrestling season, coach.
Okay, good point, okay. So, variable expense doesn't change, or it does change, excuse me. On to the next expense, fixed expenses. An expense that does not change from month to month. So unlike the variable changes which do, these expenses do not change. So you guys probably don't have too many fixed expenses in your life right now, but all your parents do, I'm sure. So, Mary, you want to give me an example of a fixed expense, please?
A mortgage.
A mortgage, yes, exactly. So your parents have to pay a mortgage every month on their house. And that's fixed. It doesn't change, unlike Joe's potato chips, which might change month to month. That's a great example. Anyone else have an example of another fixed expense? Yes, Jessica.
Cell phone bills.
Cell phone bills. Okay, that's a good example. Do you have a cell phone?
Yeah.
Do your parents pay for it, I'm assuming?
No, I spend $10 a month on it. I only pay part of my bill.
So does that ever change though? Do you always pay your parents?
I always pay
$10
$10
a month?
a month.
You always do. Okay, so that's great. That's a perfect example of a fixed expense. Jessica pays $10 a month to her parents for her cell phone, which she's on right now. Jessica, can I have your phone, please?
Yeah, sorry, Mr. Bester.
Thank you. We'll get this at the end of class. Anyways, moving on. Okay, goals. Budgeting's all about goals, which are any future plans or objectives that require specific financing. So, who in here has any goals they would like to share with the class? It could be short term, it could be long term, it doesn't really matter. Molly,
I want to buy a car.
you want to buy a car. When do you want to buy a car by?
By the time I graduate.
Okay, so that's a ways away. So we're going to consider that a long-term goal, right? So what kind of specific financing are you going to need to undertake to reach this long-term goal of getting a car?
I should probably start babysitting more.
You probably should start babysitting more. Maybe find a different source of income too.
That sounds hard, Mr. Bester.
It does?
Yeah, I don't like that.
Okay, so just babysitting, but what else could you do to quicker your receiving to your goal?
Get a real job, but that doesn't sound fun.
Okay, but other than income, what about expenses? We talked about those, right? You could lower your expenses that you're currently using and save more money towards that car, right?
I guess, but that would mean that, like, I couldn't go out to the movies as often, right?
If you chose that, you could go to the movies as much, but decrease the amount of makeup you buy. It just all depends on how you want to budget.
Mr. Bester, I'm not going to buy less makeup. That's silly.
Okay, well, it's your choice. That's why we budget. It's all about choices. Moving on, though. Okay, here we got an example of a pretty complex budget sheet. I know the one we did on the board earlier was pretty simple, and it didn't include a lot of the categories you see on here. For example, this is the kind of budget sheet your parents probably do monthly. As you can see, under income, we got wages, interests, dividends, miscellaneous, and under expenses, different things like utilities, telephone bills, home improvement, home repairs, that sort of thing. Stuff you guys won't have to worry about for a few years at least, but trust me, you're going to definitely be seeing budget sheets like this in the future when you go to college and enter your careers. Alright, and that's all we have for our note-taking today. Any questions before we move on to our simple budget sheets that are going to be due at the end of class? Yes, Joanne.
Does gas fall under variable or fixed?
That's a great question. Okay, so gas is an expense. We know that, but what Joanne wants to know is whether it falls under fixed or variable. This is a great question because it actually could fall under either, right? Does anyone know why? Joe?
'Cause sometimes you go on long drives and sometimes you don't need to drive all the way over the pass.
Yeah, that's true. Some families or individuals that budget could consider gasoline a fixed expense because they might budget a certain amount of money and stick to that no matter what for gasoline. But it could also be considered a variable expense under different circumstances. For example, if you went on a spontaneous road trip that you didn't account for in your budget, then it could fall under a variable expense. Great question. Great question. Any more?
No, Mr. Pastor, can we just have our sheets now?
Alright, that's going to do it. Thank you guys.